Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And well, today, geez, there's so much going on in the news, and so consistent, isn't it, with the things we've been talking about and what we've been saying. I mean, like we've been saying in previous weeks, just expect every week to be crazy for the next couple of years. And it certainly was, they indicted Trump, of course. And interestingly, right before they indicted him, they said, well, there's a pre-planned adjournment of the court, and it was all pre-planned, and so they're going to reconvene in a month. So that's going to happen for a month. And then the very next day, they indict him, which I just find that interesting. It's like they're sort of intentionally jerking everybody around, and then the whole thing is sealed, so nobody knows what the claims are. And then they say there are 30 violations now. They say, and nobody knows what they are. So we'll find out. But anyway, it's all kind of crazy. Another thing that I think is pretty crazy, this whole thing with Newsmax, Scotty.
Yeah.
And DirecTV. The way it came out originally was that DirecTV kicked Newsmax off and said that they wanted too much money or something like that. And Newsmax said that they were one of the top-rated news channels on DirecTV, but they were paying way less money. DirecTV had a much better deal with them than they did with a lot of other liberal media news stations on DirecTV that they kept. But Newsmax was the one that they kicked off, even though they were getting a lot better deal and having a lot more coverage. So that obviously speaks to the idea that it was political. They didn't want them on there because of political considerations. And that, to me, was pretty reprehensible, that DirecTV would do such a thing. AT&T owns, the majority of it, I guess. But then, they got back together. Now, I guess Newsmax, I don't have DirecTV anymore. I canceled it. But I guess Newsmax, and I'm glad I did, by the way. It's a whole other story, but no more wires and cables and boxes all over. And also, there's a whole world out there of apps and things, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And it's cheaper too, Anyway, then what happened is that Newsmax and DirecTV got back together. Newsmax is back on DirecTV. And then these newscasters on DirecTV, and some of them, they seem like very respectable people. And I mean, you tell me. But the thing is, they all of a sudden they were saying, well, we finally came to terms about the financial agreement and everything is good. And no reference to the idea that what they were claiming before, that it was politically motivated. It was strictly business. And now that they have a deal, it's all fine. So either way, these people we're supposed to trust, these newscasters and that we're supposed to trust, are lying. They were either lying then or they're lying now. You get what I'm saying, Scotty?
Yeah, well, I was watching the podcast on, there's Matt Taibbi and the Schellenberger, I think is the guy's name, that were...
I don't know, I know Taibbi.
Taibbi, the Twitter files. There were two guys.
Oh, there were two of them, yeah.
That were on the... in front of
I got you. Yeah, I remember the other guy.
So they just had a podcast.
Mm-hmm,
but this guy is talking about how... And he confirmed that, well, number one, he says the internet was born out of, a U.S. government program. That's how the internet started.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Facebook started out of a military program. You know,
Right. So what's
all
the point?
these
So what's the point?
all these things are government. You know, there's a deep state that's controlling most of these things. So when they want you to see something, they're driving certain things. But the thing that I don't understand about this whole thing you're talking about, the TV channels and stuff, is that all those news stations are in trouble. Nobody's watching them anyway. It, you know what I mean? The CNN, the all them, their viewership is very small. You know,
I think that's true for all of them. It's true for
yeah,
all news stations, conservative, liberal, everybody, right? Or
it
no?
doesn't matter. Yeah, everybody wants these sound bites. You know, and they're getting them from these
I get it.
independent.
Yeah. And especially now because it's the same stuff over and over again. Trump is bad. This is bad. This was bad. You know, in Ukraine, and it's the same stuff over and over again. And who do you believe? You know, and so why? It's almost like why watch? I get it. But still, the thing that really bothers me is that they were just so. I mean, anybody who paid any attention, were they lying then or are they lying now? And what are we supposed to do with that? Is that supposed to have no effect on our attitude towards them? And is that just, business as usual and everybody's fine with it and there's nothing wrong with lying? I have a hard time with it. I really do.
Yeah, I
Where's
mean,
the integrity, And I get it. That was part of the business deal. If you want to get back on DirecTV, then you have to sign this document. And you could tell they were it really seemed like they were trying to, they were reading something that they were supposed to say on the air. And so they were just doing it. But, and maybe that's just the way the world works and everybody's fine with it, but it just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. Anyway, there's that.
well, Michael, I was thinking about something that Maharshi. I had read about Maharshi because
Mhm.
we're back working with. I think it was all the way back to Marriott. We talked. I had come across this thing that he talked about how if everything is aligned in your business or whatever, everybody's going in the same direction. Nothing can hurt you. It's like a superconductor because the superconductor, all the molecules or whatever are in the same alignment. They're,
Yeah.
you know,
There's a principle that they talk about as I've heard it referred to as the Meissner effect. And that's the idea that one little crack in the coherence and the whole thing falls apart. And a nice analogy that is like if you have a pickle jar, you don't have that clear plastic thing around the top, that holds the lid
yeah,
on. It's really hard to get that thing off,
right,
you got to work at it. But if you take a knife and just a little cut anywhere along the top of that thing, and it just tears right open, one little crack, you know.
yeah,
And organizations are like that too. You get one little negative person in there. Uh, uh, I remember this one woman that was it. I'm not lecturing anymore, but she was coming to the classes and she was big in corporate America, I guess. And she said uh, the way she put it is, rumors destroy organizations. One person starts a rumor and it just spreads like a cancer. And it's the same kind of thing. One little crack in the coherence, and it spreads. And then what happens? All they have to do is convince one person. And now you got two people saying the same thing, and then that crack just spreads, and it destroys the whole organization. Now,
well, that's
along those lines, Scotty, here's something that Trump was saying: drain the swamp, right? And that was his whole thing: drain the swamp. Well, Congress, for example, they have a whole fund and there's millions of dollars in it every year. And it is used strictly for hush money. That's the purpose of that fund. And anytime, anybody gets in trouble, kind of like Trump with, what's her name, there's the money there to hush her up. And that's taxpayer money that Congress approved, and it's just hush money. Now, the same thing, if that's the kind of integrity, and Trump is saying, drain the swamp. Congressmen, be they Democrat, Republican, whatever, don't want him to get elected because they're part of the swamp. They've been, paying hush money or, insider trading on taxes, or God knows what they're doing. And so they're protecting their own selves and their own corruption. And the whole thing is just being perpetuated like that. And all that is just so wrong, Well, on another note, this expression, that we all hear, all men are created equal, all people are created equal. I don't think they even know what that means. Maybe, the founding fathers had a better grasp of it. But obviously, we're not all created equal. There are people that are just skilled at music. They can pick up a musical instrument and they can figure it out, and they're just incredible overnight almost, certainly compared to me. Different people have different qualities, they have different talents, they have different abilities. So in that regard, we are not created equal, period. So what does it mean? And I think if you ask any politician or any government leader, or even any religious leader, perhaps, majority perhaps, what does it mean that all people are created equal? What would they say? I don't think they have a clue. Now, from the Vedic perspective, what does it mean we're all created equal? From the Vedic perspective, it's quite self-evident. From the talks about the Vedic knowledge that I've given in these podcasts, it's pretty clear. Everybody is, in their essence, the unified field, where we are all that same one thing. So at the source of our being is that source that birthed the whole universe. Infinite potential, unbounded, infinite knowledge, infinite intelligence, infinite creativity. All the values and qualities that birth all the wonders of the whole universe. And that's what it means. But the question on the surface of life is how much of that and in what ways have we manifested that? So in the depth, we're all created equal. And that's why, giving equal opportunity, we should all have the opportunity to manifest that. But to say we're all born equal, you don't know better, have an understanding of what that means. And it's a pretty deep understanding, certainly compared to conventional understanding that's out there, Anyway, there's this other thing going on, and I imagine you've heard about this, but they talk about a huge decline that there is in patriotism and the decline in religion. And so many younger people in America, they don't even want to have children. But I'd like to take a look at some of those three things one at a time. The whole idea of patriotism. Any nation, but we can even focus on the US, but this is true of any nation. If you look at the history of any nation, what are we looking at? We're looking at the history of humanity. And where are we at? We live in Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance, the age where the negative energies in the universe are concentrated within individuals, within the individuals. They say Rakshasas dwell within people. In Satyuga, they live on another planet somewhere, those qualities, you know. And then other times they live on another continent. Interestingly enough, you know, intuitively we know these things. We really do. And that's where so many science fiction and fantasy things and all that comes from. That's why we like them, because it frees us from the bounds of our limited thinking, and it opens us to those deeper levels of knowing. Wizard of Oz, those flying monkeys and the Wicked Witch, you know, and all that. Where do they live? In the forest, in the deep, dark, hidden forest. Well, in the cycle of the yugas, there's a period of time when the Rakshasas, that's where they live. And so we're relating to that, so it makes sense to us. But in this age, the Rakshasas live within people. Now, I was noticing that it's really popular, this stuff about zombies and you know, evil spirits, disembodied spirits taking over people's bodies and things like that. And that whole zombie kind of mentality is really popular right now in the movies and things like that. And, you know, why do you think that is? Same idea. On the surface, we may, oh no, we don't believe in zombies or anything, blah, blah. But on another level, on a deeper level, people have that intuitive feeling that, yeah, this, you know, Rakshasas are dwelling inside of people. And so it manifests in the fantasy world, in the Hollywood sense, in the Bollywood sense, it manifests as zombies, you know? So we know so much more than we give ourselves credit for, because we shroud it in our preconceived notions, in our conditioned beliefs. And that's why I titled this, What One Eats. You know, when I say eats, I don't just mean food. I mean what we consume, how we think, how we're conditioned to think, the people we hang out with, and how they think, and the mentalities we share. Scotty, what was that? You were telling me, where did I see it? Was it you telling me? There's studies now that so much of what we've been taught, so much of what we learn, it's not really the truth that they know. It's what they want us to believe. We certainly see that in politics, don't we? But also, I think it's clear that there are these technologies that have been buried. Do you know there are 5,000, around 5,000 patents in the past, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, something like that, have been confiscated by the government and hidden. They don't want people to know what was patented. What do you think that's about, Scotty?
Well, yeah, there's a guy, that David Greer, is coming out with a movie that he's funded called The Lost 100 Years, which is talking directly about that, and how there's certain technology, because from we were talking about earlier, business wise, it doesn't make for good business, you know. So if they have
if
a cure for
you own $1
cancer,
trillion worth of oil saturated land, and somebody comes up with something that outmodes the petro industry,
yeah,
you have a vested interest in getting rid of that patent.
yep,
And then you've got the whole industrial, military, governmental complex behind you.
medical. Don't forget the medical.
Yeah, the whole medical complex. Yeah. So somebody was saying to me the other day that they just have a feeling that over the next 20 or 30 years, all these great inventions might be coming out that transform the world. And I said, they're already out. They've already happened. We already have them. We don't have to develop them. They're just hidden. They're not shared.
Yeah.
I know of one just quite privately that it just got buried. I'm not really free to talk about it. I wish I could, but it would transform so much of the medical industry. But it's been suppressed, and it's I don't know, but it's just such a shame, you know. And there's just 5,000 at least things like that, you know. See, what happens is that I even remember my older daughter when she first started going to school and that and hanging out with her friends and stuff. You could just see her mentality shift as it conformed to her peers, you know. And it was amazing, and I understand that, and that's normal and all that. But the power of it, the sheer power of it, was remarkable to witness, you know. And that's why I say what one eats in that sense, what we consume, what the environment we put ourselves in, it dictates how we think and how we view things, and the width, the breadth of our vision, how wide we can see. We talked a little bit about UFOs, or quite a bit last time. Remember, Scotty, in the last podcast?
Yeah.
And I before, during, and after that podcast, I was like, man, I know that a lot of people who hear this are just going to think we're out to lunch, you know?
But Michael, at the same time, it's never been more mainstream, the UFO talk, than it
Yeah.
is right now.
I'm agreeing with that. It's coming to the forefront. But that's why in the little blurb after I said strong minds, discerning versus narrow. So you can have a strong mind with a very narrow vision. And the narrow vision can also be kind of sort of a new age flipped out attitude towards UFOs and that, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a difference between being opinionated from a narrow minded, limited perspective, a fanatical perspective, an indoctrinated perspective, versus having a strong mind from a discerning point of view, from a discerning perspective.
Understanding.
And what's that?
Understanding.
Yeah, from an understanding.
Versus over.
Yeah, not overstanding. Humility built right into it. But nevertheless, either way, if your vision is narrow, you don't look at it and say, okay, I have narrow vision. No, you look at it and you say, oh, I'm so discerning. I get it and other people don't. So to be able to distinguish between those who's narrow-minded and who's discerning is not so easy to do. And of course, people, why do they have their perspective? Because they think they're right. If they didn't think it was right, that wouldn't be their perspective. So the whole thing becomes very frozen, you know. And so understanding, like Scotty was saying, standing under, there's humility built right into the word. So to really have understanding, we have to get past sort of this ego identity of overstanding and narrow-minded, strongly holding on to your perspective, and we start to become open-minded without just going off into la la land, for example. Okay.
Well, see, Michael, I think that goes back into our thing we're talking about with these, Democrats, Republican. Everybody is like overstanding their point of view, trying to force that narrative, and instead of, hey,
it's such a good point.
And
isn't it true that in a political debate, you're never going to hear one guy make a statement, the other guy say, "Oh wow, that's a great insight. Let's think about that a little more." How it's no. Both are trying to overstand the other one. And where does that get you? It's a deadlock, Sharing of thoughts, exploring ideas. That's why that Eleanor Roosevelt quote that I have in the notes on the blog to this podcast is such a nice quote, Small minds talk about people. Oh, this guy's bad. This guy's nuts. Or, oh, I like this person, Mediocre minds talk about events. Oh, did you see what he did, or did you see what happened? Great minds talk about ideas.
Yeah.
It's concepts.
It was funny. I saw this thing yesterday, Michael, that about she had this one lady that I've been seeing a bunch of her podcasts on. She's more conservative minded, and she got actually thrown off this one called The Hill, because she was talking about the COVID thing. But she had this economist guy that actually was in school with Janet Yellen, but he leans more towards, they call him almost communist in a way, and and because he I guess in the past he's said stuff, but he's kind of loosened up about some of his ideas. But he's talking about this economy going back and forth, and she's like, well, what we have now with this open system and the way that we run, our system now is so much better than communism. And he's like, well, if you notice, this system that we're using right now breaks down every 4 or 5 years or 10 years or whatever the time frame it was.
Yeah.
And it has to be somewhere. There has to be some middle ground, or there has to be some kind of hybrid that is, and if you think about it, we do have kind of a hybrid society here between capitalism and communism.
Yeah, but what it really amounts to is it's all a function, and this guy,
Yeah.
The level of consciousness of the people.
Yeah.
And the leader, we get what we deserve. We put the people in office that are a reflection of the global consciousness. And even if even when the voting is rigged, still the same thing. If the global consciousness, if the group consciousness was strong, they wouldn't be able to do that. And so we get what we deserve. There's so much we could say about all these things. I don't know what to say about it all, other than that we just have to raise global consciousness. And see, that's an idea that's so foreign to this strong-minded, white-knuckle holding on to a paradigm that just doesn't even recognize that. If you watch the news, it's all about people and events. It's really not taking a step back and looking at it from a broader, wider understanding of the nature of life, the nature of existence. It's all just sort of this tit for tat, back and forth. Even the best of the newscasters, none of them ever get past that. So now back to patriotism. Why are we not patriotic? Oh, because we started this war, or oh, because we did this, or that was terrible, or how can we be patriotic in a country that has racism and all that? But what we're talking about here is human nature, and you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Every nation has bathwater. It's the fishbowl is polluted, okay, of global consciousness. So what we want to do is feed and nurture the nation. Like I remember Dr. Shen, my dear friend, Chinese doctor, passed away. He was an internationally known great Chinese doctor. He says, I don't treat disease. He says, I treat health. And right now we're in a world where everybody's attacking everybody else. It's all about they're the disease. And no, you're the disease. And so patriotism goes out the window with that. It's no longer about health. In fact, we're at the point now where we mock health. And a person, if they're patriotic, it just almost seems corny to people, So patriotism, we just have to face, if patriotism is a good thing, but we have to recognize that every nation has done very bad things. And we just need to purify that out. And the best way to do that is raise global consciousness. Now, religion and the decline in religion, that's another really interesting topic. And no kidding, until very recently with the whole, this thing with trans thing, and then in Tennessee, anyway, I always viewed the rejection of religion as, oh yeah, they reject religion because it's, hard to believe that God was some guy sitting on a cloud up there deciding he likes this person and sends them blessings if you ask him for blessings. And it's just too superficial. And plus, we got airplanes that went up there, and no God's up there sitting on the clouds that we could see. And there's a lot of superficial interpretations of really profound and beautiful concepts, no question about it. But just how deep does the understanding of those beautiful and profound concepts offered in the Bible, for example, how deep do they go? How deep is the understanding? And I always thought that was the basic reason why people are rejecting religion. And I'm sure there's certainly a component of that. But now there's this whole other component to it, that it's become religions like, for example, Christianity has become associated with this whole cultural orientation, and I think a lot of people might associate it with kind of like the WASP thing, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant type thing. And it becomes kind of this narrow-minded, I guess you'd say, culturally limited sort of, how would you put it, Scotty? Just sort of meat and potato and white bread kind of a mentality, But the problem with that then is every culture, every subculture, every group, every family, and every individual, as far as that goes, they all have their qualities and their characteristics, and they're a little foreign, a little different than, the neighbors down the road, or the church down the road, or the other religion down the road. And so becomes like this sense of difference can easily lead into an aversion. And the roots of it, like the roots, there's a cultural integrity there where we have our culture and we like it and we want to keep it the way it is. And there's a beauty to it. The Christian faith, in the very conservative sense, that there's a beauty to it. The tradition of Thanksgiving and Christmas and yada, yada. That's a good thing. But racism is cultural integrity gone insane. And that's another thing. Geez, they talk so much about racism and all that, and then they try to uphold the cultural integrity thing in a different way, but they don't really get how those two relate and how they get blurred and the whole thing. And that's all there is to it. Cultural integrity is a good thing, but when it gets nutty and too narrow and too strongly adhered to a narrow belief that blocks everything else out, then it just starts to get insane and it becomes racism. You see? And that has become associated with the different religions. And so they talk about this girl that, I don't know, is it okay to call her a girl or a woman? I don't know what I'm supposed to say, but evidently she's transsexual. I don't think anybody knows if she was taking hormones or not. And I guess she wrote this manifesto, which she even said it will explain everything. She told her friend or something before she went and killed those people. But evidently the conservative or the liberal left doesn't like what she said. I guess it's a bad reflection on, I don't know, transsexuals, or I don't know what. And so they're not releasing it. It's sealed. And then I saw, because I like to watch the full spectrum of different news stations as much as I can take it. I watch a little bit of each. And there were people on the liberal stations, encouraging the transsexual, what do they call it, subculture, to arm. They say you need to defend yourselves. You need to be armed, buy weapons. But now, wait a minute, that same liberal media is the group that wants to ban weapons. I mean, the whole thing is crazy.
It just seems like they want it goes back to what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, what's that?
I said it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It seems like right now they want whoever, I don't know, you fill in the blank, wants to create as much chaos as possible so that this whole thing just comes crumbling down.
Well, that's a
You
very interesting point you bring up, Scotty, and I think I've even put it in my notes here. There was a former KGB operative that was interviewed. I don't know if it's in the United Kingdom or the U.S. or where. And this KGB operative said, people think the KGB is all about spying on the United States and stuff like that. He said 85%, he said, of KGB activity was all about undermining America. Only 15% was about spying. The rest was about infiltrating educational systems, doing whatever they could to pervert the mentality of the culture. I'm sure to associate with drugs. And we've talked about it in the past. Obviously, China is doing the same thing with the fentanyl and that whole thing. And doesn't that relate to what you just said, Scotty?
Yeah. I mean, I think this whole thing is just insane because, like, I was watching another podcast yesterday talking about Ukraine and what's going on there and how the Ukrainians are in trouble from what I've heard on this one town that it's like the last stand or something. Yeah. And they've got 80,000 people that they're putting there. And basically the West has kind of underestimated Putin and his strength. Because remember at the beginning, the narrative is that Russia's got all this old stuff. They're not doing well. And it's just kind of, from what I've heard, it's kind of their MO is to, but the point is that we as these things, I mean, we're going to have to deal with all these people. It's like, you want to try to squash these guys so that we can win. You want to squash the Russians. You want to squash the Chinese. It's like, we need Chinese because they need to make some of our stuff. We need Russia because they need to.
It's also convoluted.
Yeah. It's like, it's so ridiculous. It's like,
Scotty, like I said, it is. It's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous across the board. Border security, COVID virus, making people stay in high rises and all share the same disease of COVID. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. And like I said, from the very, very beginning, when the Ukraine thing first started, I said it right on this podcast more than once. No good is going to come out of that. All it's going to do is make a mess and destroy the country. And that is exactly what happened. And more than once it's come out in the news that Ukraine and Russia were open to negotiating and establishing peace. But it was the United States that didn't want it. They wanted to use their Ukraine to try to turn it into like what happened to the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, remember? They wanted to turn that into the same sort of a thing and just bring, not now the Soviet Union, because it already went down, but now bring Russia down to its knees. And all it did was bring Russia and China together. And like has been said for decades, I think it was even, who was it? Might have been Nixon or Reagan or one of those guys. I think it might have been Nixon way back then. Some politician said, we can never let those two nations come together in a unified way as allies because they would be so powerful. And that's exactly what's happening. Now China is trading with Brazil, not using US dollar. That's brutal for the world economy. China controls both ends of the Panama Canal now. China has infiltrated Africa. Obviously, China has infiltrated the United States in a very clandestine way. All that is going on, and it's all completely nuts, you know. And but here's what I think. I do have strong beliefs. The foundation is solid, and see, that's the beauty of the thing too, is that the foundation, the Chinese people are good. You know, people all over the world are good. It's the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Those are the people. I have some friends that are Chinese, and I remember one of them was telling me that the CCP said their hearts are black. He said, that won't stand. And with the golden age coming, Sat Yuga coming, as it is, there's no way that the CCP is going to be the governing body that ushers that in. It's just not going to happen. So that's why I say, hang in there. You know, things are going to get better. Things are going to get healthy. The foundation. If you just read the Constitution of the United States and sidestep all the hype and noise around it, the ideals behind it, and after all of the anti-patriotism and anti-religion, all that dust will clear, you know, and things will straighten out, you know. I feel absolutely certain of that, you know. 1 in 3 Americans are lonely, and 60% of young Americans are lonely. Why do you think that is? It's the demise of the integrity of the family unit, of the community unit, of the integrity of the cultures and subcultures, you know. And now they're talking about reparations for the blacks. Money isn't going to. That's not going to do it. That's not the problem. The problem isn't money. The problem is that the sad truth. The problem is that by virtue of slavery, what happened to them when slavery happened? Which of course started in Africa. It was the African kings are the ones that enslaved those people and then sold them to the Dutch and everywhere else, largely. But that's a tangential point. The point is that when a group of people like that get enslaved, their culture got destroyed, and so the integrity of their culture got compromised. And so what has to happen is the integrity of a culture has to get built, and the attempts, if you just watch, the attempts to build the integrity of the Black culture has not solely, but to a degree has been militant. It's been militant. And that's a huge problem, because real cultural integrity is not militant. If that's cultural integrity gone insane, that's racist. Cultural integrity is a grassroots, beautiful thing. And now they even mock it. You know, even what they call, I think there are other expressions than Uncle Tom. I don't know what they call them, but they're such beautiful Black people, of course, and they have such dignity and such integrity in that. But then there's this militant shroud almost that's compromising the whole thing. What we need is for every subculture, every culture, every race to feed and support that, and that has to come from deep within. And you can't buy that with money. In fact, money, I think, would even feed the antithesis of that. You know, what would people do if people don't have the moral integrity, they're not going to buy it when you give them money. They're going to just perpetuate their current mentality with that money and their current belief systems, you know? Anyway, I mean, if you want reparations, so, you know, what about the Jews? Aren't they going to get their reparations from the Holocaust? And look at every culture. I mean, look what they
Hoplites.
did. What's that?
The hoplites from the Greeks, you know.
Yeah, and look what they did to the Irish when they first came to the United States, the Germans, all those different subgroups. They all deserve reparations. I mean, the whole world deserves reparations in that sense. That's ridiculous, you know. I am sensitive to the problem with the blacks, which is a major problem. I'm just saying giving them money isn't going to solve it, you know. Well, we'll see what happens with the grand jury, you know, and you know, now they're talking about supporting and feeding and nurturing the trans culture. Do you know that that transsexuals used to be called gender dysphoria? That was the medical term for it in the books. You know, it was considered a mental disease. You know, and it's not my claim. I mean, live and let live. You know, and people have different orientations, they have different beliefs, they have different worlds that they live in. The only problem that I have is I don't want to take the Christians and force them upon the Jews. I don't want to take the Jews and force them on the Christians. I don't want to take the transsexuals and force them upon the Christians. I don't want to take any of that, you know, and leave the children out of it, you know. Live and let live, you know.
Michael, is it kind of important for us to understand, you know, what the caste system was originally?
Yeah, the caste system.
Well,
It's so
what it was
even in
originally
India, to be
intended
honest
to
with
do. You know
it's
what
so
I mean?
misunderstood. What the idea of the caste system, if we liken to, you know, different people have different hair color, different people have different eye color. Some people have blue eyes, some people have brown eyes. Like so, there's a genetic component, and like that, I mean, let's face it. Some people have the kind of genes where they can do physical things, be it sports or physical activity or work. You know, I had a friend, a wonderful guy. I loved him, you know. And I remember he went to his guru, you know, and he asked him, you know, what's my life path, or I forget how he put it. And the guru told him, he said, you should always do hard physical labor. And the guy was like blown away, you know. But that was just the nature of his physiology, you know. There are other people that I can't. This is one I have a hard time relating to. I'll be honest with you, but some people just thrive on business, making money. Let's make a deal. Let's do this. You know, you know, have all this merchandise and I made this much profit in one day, and isn't that great? It feeds them, and they feel really fulfilled, and they go home at night, and their life is great. That's another type of nervous system. It's another type of physiology. I don't judge it. It's just not the way I function. And then there are the other another group, and that group is very intellectually oriented, even spiritually oriented. They're the scholars. They're the real pundits, but the point is then that these different groups is not just the club you joined. It's the nature of the physiology, and those are called the castes. That's the real nature of the caste system. And wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if you were born into a family that the whole orientation of the family, the life that they led and everything was all based upon the nature of the nervous systems that all the people in that family shared, you know? And gee, wouldn't that be something? You were born into an environment that just resonated with the depth of your soul and the very nature of your being. It just fed you and supported you, you know? That's what it originally was, but, you know, and there's still, I mean, I'll tell you, I have met some people from India, the Indian community, and some of them are like from small villages and that, and they did, doesn't have to be, but the ones I'm thinking of in this moment are, and they are the most exquisitely refined and dignified and beautifully, I use the word cultivated, I guess, people that you'd ever want to meet. It's just like remarkable. It's humbling, you know. And that really comes from living a life that is just naturally in accord with your own true nature, you know. That's the real idea behind the
Yeah,
caste system.
and see that maps onto cultures too in a bigger way. You know, like what you're talking about, the small village. I was just thinking of something I saw the other day about. I've been to Congo before, like the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. On the eastern part of it, there's still tribes out in the jungle and stuff. And there's a guy from Los Angeles, is a famous artist. He's a Korean guy. He went and hung out with these guys for like a few months out in the jungle. And he said it was amazing. He said in the morning, these guys would get up and they'd do this little whistle, and this bird would come over and it would show them where the honey was, right? And then he said then they'd go hunting, and he says, you know, I can't run for 50 yards, much less these guys are running like all day, you
Yeah, I've
know.
heard
And he
that
said
kind of
then
thing.
they'd dig a little hole, and they'd get a handful of dirty water, and then they'd be okay to keep going for another like few hours, you know.
Yeah.
And they're looking, you know, with his guide or whoever he was with, he said they were looking at him like, what's wrong with him, you know, like what's his deal? It doesn't look like he's ever caught anything. And talking about the guy from America that had come over, and he's like, you know, how does he get any food? And they go, and the guy goes, well, he gets it at a grocery store. And then the guy's like, what's a grocery store, you know? And just, he said, just, but their whole ecosystem of how they lived and everything, they were so in harmony with nature.
There are a lot of studies like that where these different, and when they try to mix different cultures like that, it just
Yeah,
doesn't work. But within their own unit, within their own system, it works great.
yeah,
But don't try to improve it, you know?
right. Yeah, let me fix these guys because they don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it
You
just
know?
doesn't work that way. Yeah. Um, oh, the other thing, been a huge decline, to cover the third one, of young people now choosing not to have children. And I don't think it's a far reach why that is. And I don't think it's because they're selfish or anything like that. It's just because they look at the world, and the world is so nuts. But now here's what's going on there. And it's just so consistent with the whole Vedic understanding. Uh, the Rakshasa mentality has dominated the world for thousands of years. And but now, with just on a pragmatic level, even with the advent of all the internet and the news and so much communication, and now people are starting to see just how nuts it is, and boy, it's nuts. And so what that's doing is it's all the negative attitudes and all the people that behind the scenes were creating wars, people are starting to see it for what it is. And so their backs now are getting to the wall, whereas before they had total control of the masses. And so how do they react to that? They freak out, they panic. And that's what we're seeing now, is that the whole thing is crazy. The politicians are going nuts. And anything they see as a threat, you know, they're doing anything they can to get Trump behind bars before he drains a swamp and throws them all in prison, you know, just as one of many examples. And that is so consistent with this mapping of that general principle that says when you take water and cool it down, it gets more and more coherent. But right when it gets down to around 32 degrees, when it's about to freeze, 0 degrees centigrade, it just goes nuts because it sees, interestingly enough, there's this transition about to happen. It doesn't know what to do. So it goes crazy. And then all of a sudden it goes to ice and it's perfectly coherent crystal. That's what's going on right now. I mean, once you take a step back and really look at it, I understand it's so foreign to modern mentality that it's like, that's way out there. But when you get onto it and you start looking around and working with it, it's like it's just so self-evident. It's so self-evident. The fishbowl of global mentality needs to get cleaned, and we have the technology to do it. The Vedic seers, they offered it in detail, and we're ready to do it. We have the technology. Let's just do it. I've been saying that ever since I learned about it in the early 80s, you know, but it seems like people are coming around, and hopefully it really amounts to money. I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, it's cheap compared to federal spending. Price of one bomb, we could have it all taken care of. You know, it's not that expensive. But anyway, we're still looking at, you know, a couple $100 million, you know. But at any rate, that's what's going on. Just one closing note about, and I just want to say this about relationships in general. I think if there's one key to healthy relationships in a nutshell, it's just that once something is said, the genie's out of the bottle. Once the milk has been spilt, there's no putting it back in the bottle. And so the key to healthy relationships is to choose your words carefully and wisely. If people could just do that, their relationships would be so much better off. So many of us, and I have to admit, you know, I'm in the category with everybody else, of course. We tend to use our mouth as a vent to let out whatever is bottled up inside of us. And that destroys relationships, you know? And then people are so vested in a position that they've taken that it's really hard to apologize. It's really hard to back away from it. And even if you do, which is great, if you do it, you're way ahead of the pack, you know? But even if you do it, once it's said, the other person heard it, and that hurts, and it's hard for them to forget it. I think I said this on one of my podcasts, and we'll close with this. Some beginning actor who I guess later became famous, but he bumped into John Wayne in a lobby or somewhere, and John Wayne was famous at the time. And what did he say? He said, he gave him 3 points. One was talk slow. Talk in a deeper tone of voice. And don't say too much. I thought that was interesting. Anything else, Scotty, before we close?
No, I think that's it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you listening. And means a lot to me, you know. All right. And also the listeners from other countries. I pay attention, you know, I don't see the specifics, you know, email addresses or whatever, anything like that, but I do see a list of, you know, this many people from this country, that many people from that country, and it touches me, you know, it does. So thanks for listening. We'll talk with you again next week.